finance and operations of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Fonz.
Present.
Director Herndon.
Present.
Director O'Halloran has asked to be excused this evening. Director Zomber.
Present.
And Chair Jackson.
Present.
That's 4 present, 1 excused. We have a quorum.
The Chair will now ask the Secretary to lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance. The Chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and asks those who do not wish to participate, please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being conducted in person from the Central Service Building. This meeting may also access via the MPS YouTube stream, the link to which may be found on the MPS website on the up-and-coming meeting page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation service for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si deseas escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor, llame al 312-626-6799. Otra vez, 312-626-6799. Introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker slip and bring it to our Secretary, Dr. Owen Moore. We have no virtual speakers registered. For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker slip and bring it to our Secretary, Dr. Owen Moore. No problem. We love you. For the sake of fairness for tonight and to give everyone a chance to speak, the Chair reserves the right to limit the length of time allowed to one speaker. Disruptive or disrespectful behavior will not be permitted. If it occurs, the meeting may be paused and those involved may be asked to step out so we can continue in a safe and productive manner. Thank you for helping to ensure a positive experience for everyone. And now, given our focus for this year's literacy, we have someone with a message from one of our young readers, Dahlia, a 7th grade student.
Comments on tonight's agenda items. Speakers may only address the item for which they have registered. Questions from the public may not be answered during the public comment period. Following public comment, the committee will begin its discussion, and no add-on comments will be accepted. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and spell your last name for the recording. Like this: Tanya Jacobs, Jacobs. Written testimony will also be accepted for transmitting to the board. Send this transmitting to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 532012181, or email it to governance@milwaukee.k12.wisconsin.us. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments, questions, or requests should be directed to the chair, who will determine the most effective way to address them. Also, no one other than members of the board is designated staff or who have been invited to present or participate in items or of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committee.
Okay. Thank you, Dahlia, for being tonight's reader. If you have a child that would like to read for the board meeting, send a message to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. We will begin our consent agenda items. There will be no formal presentations on these items. We will have one public comment period for items listed on the consent agenda. All consent agenda items are recommended for approval. Following public comment, committee members may ask for consent agenda items to be set aside for separate discussion action. Items on the consent agenda that are not set aside will be handled with one motion. Madam Secretary, do any members of the public wish to speak on the consent agenda?
We do have a number of people that signed up for agenda item 2, but it's not clear if it's consent agenda item 2 or the separate considerations, the salary schedules or the administrative appointments.
Is there anybody whose intention was to speak on item 2 of the consent agenda, which is action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, or reclassifications? That was, okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I have Ann Mansfield. Yep, you may go. Yes, I don't think your mic is on yet.
Okay.
What's that? I believe so. The board does have the ability to step aside.
Mr. Chair, Madam Superintendent, speakers should not speak about individual people by naming names because the board could go into closed session to discuss this item, but you can make general comments about the administrative appointment list.
The chair could ask that the signs not be displayed.
Say it again. Say it again, Superintendent.
The
Other districts that I've been in, and I'm not sure the rules in Wisconsin is why I'm asking, that when you talk about personnel matters, typically those are in closed session, and even in board comment, we're not discussing this person on the agenda. We are discussing other personnel matters that are of public nature. This is a personnel matter that we're handling. I'm not trying to close down comment. I don't mind if they make comment. I just don't think we should name names. I think that that's a matter of personal reputation, should be safe for the closed session with the board.
Yeah, can we see that?
I can also, I feel comfortable speaking to the issue without naming names.
Just, but the rest of the
Any-
names are
yeah.
all
Yeah,
for.
No names.
Well, just the name, I better on, sorry.
All right,
Much more respectful, thank you.
all right. You have the floor.
Okay. Ann Mansfield, Mansfield. I have taught at La Escuela Fratney since 2000. Yesterday was my last day. And I've taught there. I've raised my children there. I went there and became the teacher I am today because of what I've learned and because of the mission and vision at La Escuela Fratney. Some of you are familiar with it. It has simply been corroding and collapsing in the last 4 years. We have had 40 staff members leave in the last 4 years. I never thought that I would be one of them today. I still have kids in college, but I can't imagine myself anywhere else. So I chose to retire. I've also spoken about and agreed to rescind that should things change and that we can get back on track. So like I said, I've taught and been part of La Escuela Fratney for 26 years and thought I would be for a few more. That's not possible anymore because the mission and vision no longer aligns with what I have come to know as the mission and vision of Fratney. So I do hope that the board reads the documents that we are providing for you today that have been submitted to leadership and to the people that we think can most help us with what needs to happen there. Please read them. There's personal accounts, there's letters from staff, from parents. There's a list of people that have left. There's 12 of us that are leaving this year, and it breaks our hearts. Not one of us came to this decision easily, nor is it one that we wanted. And so we came here tonight hoping that you can help us find a way forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Antimo.
Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Antimo, A-N-T-I-M-O, first name Blas. Good evening, board members. I'm speaking today regarding agenda item number 2, specifically about finance operations. We often talk about the budget in terms of dollars and cents, but the most significant financial investment in this district is our human capital, our teachers. When we lose experienced educators, we lose thousands of dollars in recruiting, onboarding, and training costs. More importantly, we lose the institutional knowledge that anchors our students' success. This year, our school, like was already mentioned, is losing 12 excellent educators. These departures are not coincidental. They are a direct result of leadership culture, or of a failing leadership culture that fails to see the value of our staff members. Families and staff have documented their experiences and brought forward concerns and provided clear evidence that our current administration is failing our community. Despite this, there has been no meaningful action or accountability. When the administration ignores the voices of the people who make this school run, it is not just a management issue, it is a fiscal one. We are paying the price for the inaction with the talent and the stability of our school, and I'm asking for the board to apply immediate pressure. We need a leadership that fosters teamwork, and fosters a climate of respect and appreciation for all staff. Our staff deserves it, our families demand it, and our student success depends on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Sarah Vanderhagen.
Hello, my name is Sarah Vanderhagen, Vanderhagen, I've been a parent at La Escuela of children at La Escuela Fraternity since 2018. We moved here from Las Vegas and specifically selected that neighborhood to be close to La Escuela Fraternity because we valued the anti-racist, social justice-focused bilingual education that the school provided. I have a rising 8th grader and a rising K-5 student. The K-5 student is the 8th grader, finished at Fraternity, had several of the teachers that you see here, and she would have stayed there forever if she could have, because of the amazing education that she received at Fraternity. I'm concerned about my daughter who just finished K4, given the massive departure of all of these valued educators who have helped me raise my older daughter and have just started that with my younger daughter, and I'm very concerned about all of these trusted people leaving the school because of the high control environment that I'm seeing being created at a place that was collaborative, that was engaging each other in communicating and planning and sharing the work of educating our children at La Escuela Fraternity. And Fraternity has a really unique community. It has one of the most racially and ethnically diverse schools in the district, as many of you are aware, and that's something that I really deeply value, and I know many of the parents value that as well at the school. And that is something that if we continue to lose the educators who know how to engage in that kind of education, who have been trained in that kind of work, who understand what it takes to educate students in an interracial environment, and do so with caring, with honesty, and build that trust with each other. If they are all leaving, We know that there is a serious problem at Fratney, and I want you to take very seriously our request that you reassign the leadership at Fratney this next school year. That is what we are asking for you to do, is to take action now so that this community that we have loved and cared for and that our children have been raised in does not disappear completely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, Rebecca Knoll.
I'm going to be reading her statement on her behalf.
Not a problem.
Okay, Rebecca Knoll, last name N-O-L-E. I didn't bring glasses, so I'm going to try my best here. My name is Rebecca Wolf, right, and I'm a parent at La Escuela Fratney and have been for the past 8 years. I do not presume to speak for all parents at our school. I do not expect or ask that confidential and specific personnel issues be made public or be shared outside of stated protocol. However, I am submitting this statement in solidarity with the teachers represented by the building committee at our school, the tremendous number of fantastic and dedicated individuals, the significant number of parents, families, and students who have also left and are leaving in these last years since our current principal started. Maybe this is the same across the district. 12 teachers are leaving in 1 year and nearly twice that many total in the past 5. Maybe it is common for families to leave from year to year. Perhaps other schools have similar issues and pages of concerns, statements, and complaints. But this has not ever been the case at La Escuela Fratney previously. I believe in due process and second chances, but in this case, there have already been processes and chances. For the district to continue to delay making the decision that will safeguard the unique mission of our school will create many problems for us. We need a leader who will also allow other leaders and collaborators to flourish. No matter what or when a decision is finally made, our school community will remain in dire need of restorative processes and support to rebuild our fractured culture, regardless of the outcome. Thank you for listening.
All right, Julie Kurtzing.
Hi there, my name is Julie Kirsting. Kersting. I am the library media specialist at La Escuela Fratney, and before that I was a bilingual kindergarten teacher at Hayes Bilingual School for 14 years. I can tell you that from the moment I started in the district, La Escuela Fratney was a school that was lauded as the example among all bilingual schools, the place where children flourish and social justice reigns and families are integrated with a super diverse population. It was the gold standard. And so when I transferred to Fratney 3 years ago, I was nervous because of that beautiful reputation that preceded it. And what I have found I believe has existed before based on what I heard about it, what I've learned from my colleagues, but it's not what I see. It's not what I see in the building. Rather than flourishing, I see an environment of control, micromanagement, where policies that suit the need are upheld and the ones that don't, or suit the agenda, are upheld and the ones that don't are neatly tucked away. Restorative practices is something that is lauded on our social media page and is not something that happens correctly in the building. I know this because I'm on the Restorative Practices Committee at our school. We can't get any traction for shared leadership, which is an initiative that was adopted, I think, with help from Bob Peterson when he was on the board. There is no shared leadership. There is the illusion of shared leadership, but staff members do not ever have a chance to offer an opinion. If opinions are offered, they are met as direct personal attacks, and the tone becomes combative almost immediately. I'm nervous right now because of what I believe will be the effect of having spoken here. And that's not what I understood about Fratney. And that's not what I see in the halls as a possibility day to day. But Fratney is withering, and The mass exodus of people has happened every single year that I've been there so far, which means that we are spending so much effort and so much time in retraining. Darn it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any committee members wish to set aside anything on a consent agenda item? Yes, Director Zambor.
I'd like to hold item 1 and item 3. Item 3 is action on monthly finance matters, and item 1 is action on monthly personnel matters.
Mr. Chason.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I'd like to hold item number 4.
All right, good. If I may, just out of turn, about your last comment addressing with the fear of, please don't let that discourage you in no way, shape, or form. I know we are working to get past that retaliatory nature of the system that we know as it once was, but thank you. Excuse me. I'd like to please have a motion to approve the balance of the recommendations of the consent agenda items. Director Zambor.
I move to approve the balance.
If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Zomber's motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda items, Director Fons.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Zomber.
Aye.
And Chair Jackson.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the first item set aside?
Chair, the first item set aside is item number 1, personnel, set aside by Director Zomber.
Director Zambor.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I was just wondering if the administration could give an update about how recruitment is going. I know it's only June, but if you could just give an update.
Administration.
Good afternoon, Board, Director Jackson, Director Zambor. The recruitment of our teachers and staff is going very well. We have completed all of our staffing cycles A, B, and C, in addition to our priority cycle that we began back in March. We are now in the tail end of that phase where we are doing what's called reassignments. So we are reconciling all of the vacancies within the districts. We are still going through IFT placements as well. IFTs are the instructional facilitator teacher jobs. We have 102 of those that we're still actually placing as we speak. We are reconciling, and we are anticipating after the reassignment process is completed, which means those folks who were accessed or laid off that are still hanging out there that need a spot, we're going to be placing them in vacancies in our schools for next year. And we anticipate that on July 1, we will have approximately about 200 teaching vacancies for the start of the school year. So we have a significant hyper-focus on that 200 and trying to attract as many teachers as we can to the district. We are looking at additional compensation strategies to try and get teachers from districts who have competing offers right now. We had 4 this week that were competing with other districts not too far away for teachers, so we just need a competitive edge to get those teachers here, and we can do it, and that's what we're working on.
Director Zambor.
Thank you. Yeah, I have heard just kind of some anecdotal stories about offers people have gotten from other districts, and I don't know if this is true or not, but one of the things that I was told is that some districts count the permit years towards your year of service. Is that becoming a barrier?
Administration.
Director Zambor, Director Jackson, thank you for that question. I would say historically it absolutely has been a barrier because we will not get that teacher when Racine or West Dallas is actually counting all of those permit years and we are not. Starting July 1, we are going to be counting those permit years moving forward for all new hires, so we're really excited about that. That is something that we also have talked with MTEA about. It's really important that when we dive into these staffing strategies that we're working with our union partners on this so that they're aligned and aware of what we're going to be doing moving forward. This is just a really important part of the overall staffing strategies. So July 1st, we will be counting permit years of experience, so we're really excited about that, in addition to some other things that we have up and coming as well.
Director Zumber.
Thank you so much for the update.
Thank you.
Any other discussion with our committee members? No? All right. What is the pleasure of this committee with respect to this item? Director Zumbar.
I move approval of the action on monthly, or the administration's recommendation on monthly personnel matters.
All right. If there's no further discussions, Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Zomber's motion to approve the administration's recommendation regarding the monthly personnel matters as attached, Director Fonz.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Zomber.
Aye.
And Chair Jackson.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes. Next item.
Absolutely. So before we move along, the chair, I would like to congratulate all candidates recommended for appointments, promotions, and transfers. We celebrate this important step in your career journey and appreciate your commitment to serving Milwaukee Public Schools. Thank you for your service and your commitment. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item set aside from the consent agenda was item number 3, finance matters. This was set aside by Director Zomber.
Director Zomber.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I was just wondering if the administration could give an update on the monthly revenue and expenditure report. And then also I had a question to clarify the waiver of admin policy 3.05. But if we could start with revenue and expenditures first, just kind of where we're at. I know we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year.
Administration.
Chair Jackson, Director Zombor, fellow Finance Committee members, Aicha Sava, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you for the question. So in the report that you see, we did add a new page for this year. We added kind of the cover page of all of our woofer funds, so you can see the revenues and expenditures. And we actually did provide a couple comments here on the right, just for a little added context, that our revenues are actually trending fairly well. We have a couple payments that were just processed last week, so they will be in there for the year end, like on Fund 10, the equalization aid, that fourth payment will be coming at the end of June. And then for Fund 80, we have $9.5 million for all of our camp fees that are booked in there that are actually not part of the budgeted revenue, so that's why it looks a little bit higher at 112%, excuse me. And then that the nutrition claims are still being processed, so they're lagging a couple months behind. So that's why those revenues look the lowest. And then finally, for Fund 46, since we are using the fund balance the way that the budget was entered, it looks like we didn't receive the money, but it's just because of the usage of the fund balance. And then on the expenditure side, we are actually trending fairly well on that side. So it looks like we're kind of going right along in track with how we should be spending. So that's kind of a very brief update, but if you, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Director Zombo.
Thank you. Could you, and this is separate from the revenue and expenditures, but could you just clarify the file attachment 6 waiver of admin policy 3.05? And then I wanted to also see if we could narrow the sections that we're requesting to waive so that it's not the whole policy. But,
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, so for the waiver of policy 3.05, we did request, in that second paragraph in the memo, we did request the waiving for section 1 and 4, which is the encumbrances, and then 4 is all of the carryover for school deficits school surplus and office surplus. So we did not, in that policy, we did not include Section 3, which is capital projects. So that would be using like the Fund 46, the long-term capital improvement. So as we all know from all of our discussions, that since we do have that deficit, we are eliminating, or we are asking for the waiver of eliminating any type of carryover, be it deficit or surplus for schools and offices. And at the same time, in the next meeting, right, we have been doing a lot of work around those policies with the Neola policies. So we are considering having some of those policies be permanent moving forward. So that is something that we're considering. But since these policies are still in effect, we are bringing this waiver forward. Does that help?
Chair Jackson and Director Zambor, one of the things that I am trying to do with the correction of cleaning up our audits for 3 years, entering in new controls for the system, is to try to give us all a fresh start where we are, and carrying forward balances from year to year is not a good control practice. And also, we've had several schools that have had deficits for many, many years, and it makes it really hard for them to be able to do other important things for children and providing supports for children in their buildings, because they're always working out of a deficit and we're constantly having to stand them up. So it's hard to actually hold them accountable, and they're holding themselves accountable from previous debt from other leaders' poor decision-making. And so trying to really clear all of our books, introduce all new controls, and give everybody a nice fresh start as we begin to move forward and hold everyone accountable.
Director Zambor.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I appreciate that you brought this forward. I guess what I'm still concerned about is what's being requested in the letter and in the attachment looks like it's school surpluses, but we would also be waiving a policy for office surpluses based on the language, and then we'd be waiving one for encumbrances. Is it okay? I mean, do you see any reason why we couldn't just make the motion to only waive 4A for school deficits and 4C for school surpluses, and then leave 4B out of it? Is that still going to be enough? I'm just worried about waiving too much of the policy.
Chair Jackson, Director Zambor, Aichasava, the issue that we have with not waiving any of that, or did I say that incorrectly? If we didn't waive any of that, we don't, we're still projecting, and then we'll be closing our books. So even if we end in a total surplus for Fund 10, we're still at a negative for our ending fund balance due to that $46 million deficit that we had. So we can't really technically carry over the funding anyway. Does that help?
Director Zambor.
Maybe
Mr. Chase.
you might phrase it differently.
Thank you, Chair Jackson, Matt Chase, and OAE. I think we're sort of all at the mercy of language in the policy that is both affirmative and then not affirmative. So with respect to school deficits, there's a requirement that the deficit shall be carried forward. With respect to school surpluses, the carry forward requires board approval. If we waive Section B under 4, that waives the requirement for board approval for an office surplus. So what that means is that a surplus in an office is not allowed in its current form. The board would actually have to approve that. And so I think by maintaining that safeguard in place, it restricts the carry forward because the board approval would be required to do so. And again, I think we're sort of at the mercy of the language going in and out as it hops across offices and schools and surpluses and deficits. So I think that might be the basis for the conversation here.
So Yeah, Director Zambor.
So I guess what I would be proposing is that we do waive 3.05, but only for A and for C for school deficits and school surpluses. So it'll allow that fund carryover for the items that were attached in this agenda. Is that correct? Though that would just be the ones that you have, the schools listed.
That was more for reference.
For
Those were the
reference,
schools
okay.
that were in the deficit as of last year. So I actually just put that in as a reference of the ones that had
But
it
any
last year.
schools, so if they
Yes.
have a surplus, they wouldn't carry over the surplus.
Correct.
Okay. I'm okay with that for the schools, but I just
Recording
want to
in
be careful not
progress.
to waive the rest of the policy.
Administration.
Chair Jackson and Director Zambor, we're only asking to carry forward we're only asking for the recommendation for which it's written and not for the whole policy to be waived. Only the sections identified.
But that's all of 4 and Section 1. Can we only do 4A and 4C?
For schools.
And that's also the
Are you
district
trying-
deficit. Well, first, it would be schools, it would allow schools.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you trying to, I'm just trying to understand, are you trying to exempt departments and offices?
And the district deficit. I'm just worried that this is way too, I
So-
mean, this is a lot to waive. It's like almost waiving the whole policy.
Well,
Administration.
So the offices, right, the ones that are all part of Fund 10, they would be, if you had some that were in deficit and some that were in surplus, and then our general fund balance came out into a deficit, you couldn't roll over the offices that are in a surplus because because then the ones that are in the surplus are making up for the other ones that are in the deficit that are all part of Fund 10. So that's where our rationale came from in order to waive that, because we don't know exactly where we're going to end up for Fund 10. So if you roll over a surplus for an office, but then the whole fund is in a deficit, you don't really have a surplus.
Chair Jackson, Director Zambor, I think if we need to pull this item and give it more thought, we're happy to do that, and give it more thought and bring it forward on Thursday, potentially, maybe hold it over, and we could have a meeting to go a little bit more in depth so that we could explain it a little better. The one thing that I would be concerned about is that, the cabinet members understand where their budget is for the FY27 and what we asked the board to pass. And they know those numbers, and everybody's been very clear that they know that their surpluses are, that we were bringing this recommendation, so there's no dependence for operational efficiency to be able to depend on any surpluses carrying forward. And I think it's the carry forward just practice that I think is a poor practice in terms of controlling for overspending with the working budget and encumbrances. And so just trying to put in place some controls. Happy to pull it now, have a little bit more discussion if you want to make an offer that.
Director Zambor.
I guess the other question I have with this is how has this been communicated to schools or principals and all of the department heads who are responsible for budgets?
It has, Chair Jackson, Director Zambor, it has been communicated to our cabinet, and they oversee all of the departments, and it has also been communicated to principals.
How about Office of Board Governance or OAE?
I believe we discussed it in our meeting.
We discussed it.
I believe
when-
we discussed
Yep.
it in our meeting to
Okay.
both Mr. Chason and Ms. Dr. Tina Moore.
That's a yes.
I would be in favor of holding it over until Thursday. I just have more questions on it.
Madam Secretary.
Maybe a motion to move this
Yeah.
forward without recommendation?
Yes.
But I think we can move to authorize the purchases, donations. Yes, but there's one other thing on the revenues and expenditure report. because I know this is June, can we also make sure to continue receiving that report until October so that we're not going to stop just because we're in June? We still need to keep getting the reports until October of 2026.
Chair Jackson
Administration.
and Director Zomber, happy to do that.
Okay.
So what would be the motion?
So I would move to authorize the purchases, accept the donations, hold the waiver of admin policy for the full board, and then direct administration to continue reporting on revenue and expenditures for FY26 until October.
Okay. How you feeling over there, Madam Secretary?
I believe so.
All right.
All right. On Director Zomber's motion to authorize the purchases, accept the donations as listed in the attachments, and to hold the waiver of policy 3.05 until the following board meeting, and to direct administration to continue providing revenue and expense reports each month through October. Did I capture it?
You got it.
All right.
Madam Secretary, that's full board meeting, correct?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Director Fons?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Zomber?
Aye.
And Chair Jackson?
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes. And I believe we had one more consent agenda.
One more consent agenda item. Mr. Chasen, item number 4.
Thank you, Chair Jackson, Matt Chasen, OE. One of the contracts in item number 4, it's the Cisco contract. We, this office, in our contract compliance service area, we're currently working with the vendor to make sure that they have an approved remediation plan. They're out of compliance with respects to some student employment requirements. Typically, we're able to come up with an approved remediation plan. We just don't have it quite yet. There were other factors of noncompliance that we have already remedied, but at this time, no interest in holding up the business of the district. If we could move all the other contracts forward, but hold the Cisco to move forward without recommendation, and I can provide an update on the complete, what I anticipate being a complete remediation of the noncompliance matters on Thursday.
Okay. And if I may, what's the percentage for students?
It's Chair Jackson, Matt Chasen, OAE. It depends on the dollar amount of the contract. Typically, career education is a fixed amount of hours, and then the dollar amount on a sliding scale produces the total number of student engagement, student employment hours. I can produce what that scale is for you before Thursday.
No problem, thank you. All right. Administration? Good. All right. What's the pleasure of this particular item? Director Zombar?
Actually, just a quick question. Do you want us to hold all of them or just that one?
Chair Jackson, Matt Chasen, OAE. You can move the balance,
Right.
just the one without recommendation. No
So-
interest in holding up the business of the district.
Then,
Mr. Chair, if I could clarify. it's-
Yes.
Does OAE expect to have more information on this item for Thursday, is my understanding? The cleanest way to do this would be to advance the whole item to the board without a recommendation. It needs to be set aside either way. So it wouldn't hold anything up, but it's just a cleaner motion.
Understood.
so then I move to hold the administration's recommendation on professional services contracts without recommendation to the full board.
Madam Secretary?
All right. On Director Zomber's motion to hold the award of professional services contracts, moving it forward to the full board without recommendation. Director Fons?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Zomber?
Aye.
And Chair Jackson?
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes.
No, on that particular item, we're just primarily looking for the Cisco piece. Correct, thank you.
Bless you.
believe, yep.
Yes.
It's a little bit back and forth in there.
Out of problem.
The remainder of the agenda items are for separate consideration. The first is, item 1 is report on transportation analysis and possible action on administrative recommendations for transportation. The recommendation is that the board approve the administration's transportation recommendations, allowing for implementation of the FY27 recommendations and the initiation of planning for FY28 recommendations. Final FY28 recommendations are anticipated to be presented to the board for approval in January of 2027.
Will the administration, please present this item?
Chair Jackson, members of the committee, Brenda Caselli is superintendent. Good evening. As part of the administration's ongoing efforts to improve efficiency, find savings, effectiveness, and sustainability of pupil transportation services, we engaged Formative to conduct a comprehensive review of our transportation system. If you recall, we were going to bring this item in April, but because of the budget, it got pushed, and so some of these recommendations may be a little old from our team and not doable for the FY27 year. They'll go through that more clearly with you as we move through it. But I wanted to be able to bring this forward so that we could begin the engagement process with our communities and our school community. Based on these analysis and additional evaluation from the administration, we will have limited recommendations for FY27 and a much more robust set of recommendations after thorough community engagement happens, both at the school level and through the community. This evening, Ms. Dillman from Formative is here with Chief Terza and Mr. Fafarik, our transportation director, to provide an overview of the review process and then provide some of the administration's reflections on the recommendations and some of their own thoughts and analyses that they might have around some of our process improvements here in Milwaukee. I'm now going to turn it over to the team to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Jackson and members of the committee. I'm Mary Dillman. I'm the Chief of Client Services for Formative Technologies. Thank you for the opportunity to share the findings from our transportation opportunity analysis with the school district. Over several months this winter and spring, Formative partnered with the district staff to examine how student transportation services are currently being delivered. We identified opportunities to improve efficiency and service quality and evaluated strategies to help the district manage costs while improving service and maintaining access for students. Tonight, I will summarize the key findings from our transportation study. I will highlight several areas where we see meaningful opportunities for the district to explore and outline recommended next steps. And then I'll pass it over to the administrative team to share how they've processed the study's findings and what they're planning to move forward with. First, just a little bit of background and a brief introduction. So Formative provides student transportation strategy, technology, and management services. Our consulting practice provides advisory services for K-12 operations for school districts and state education agencies across the country. On transportation planning, operations, routing, vendor performance management, and long-term sustainability initiatives. While every district is unique, many of the challenges that Milwaukee Public Schools faces today, like rising costs, service reliability issues, and increasing complexity, these are challenges that we see across the country. And that perspective informs the analysis that we're sharing this evening. So our work with Milwaukee was organized into 4 major components. First, we developed a comprehensive system baseline to understand how student transportation currently operates in the district. That's the system summary. Then we, second, completed an opportunity analysis to identify efficiency improvements and then estimate the potential savings. And then third, we evaluated where public transit could serve as a viable transportation option for high school students. And fourth, we reviewed transportation service for students receiving transportation as a related service, with a focus on pinpointing opportunities to support inclusion goals as well as operational efficiency. So our aim was to identify, across the board, these broad opportunities to improve service quality while ensuring that students, continue to have access to the educational opportunities that they need. The big headline finding here, and this won't be a surprise for many of you all, is that the district operates an exceptionally complex transportation system. So you can see the district operates more than 800 vehicles across 17 different vendors and serves students through a 3-tier bell time structure. That's incredibly complex operation to manage. At the same time, the district provides very high levels of service. The typical student travels less than 1/10 of a mile to their bus stop, and many routes operate with significantly unused capacity. And I'll discuss how those are related. And then we also found that 1/3 of trips lack GPS tracking, and that makes it difficult for, both the transportation department to consistently monitor performance for those 17 different vendors, and also challenging for families to track their students' bus and just understand in real time how service is running. Taken together, these, top headline findings suggest that there are opportunities to improve both efficiency and operational visibility without fundamentally changing the district's commitment to student access. So I'll start, one area that stood out in our analysis is stop spacing. When compared to peer districts across the country, Milwaukee Public Schools provides transportation stops that are very close to students' homes. For elementary students, the district maximum policy home to stop distance is 1/4 mile. And for middle school and high school students, it's 1/2 mile. Those distances are considerably shorter than what we observe in most large urban or suburban school districts. And this policy does reflect a strong commitment to convenience. However, it also requires more bus stops, longer student ride times, more opportunities, we call them failure points, for something to go wrong, for service to get off schedule, lower seat utilization, and ultimately higher transportation costs. This chart visualizes, that point. 87% of large districts that we reviewed allow elementary students to travel farther to their bus stops than the Milwaukee Public Schools policy currently permits. It's not about matching, what other districts do just for the sake of parity, but it's important context to just position Milwaukee's policy within the broader national context. And it does highlight how unusually accommodating the district's current policy is. Formative doesn't propose pursuing any dramatic policy changes. Modest adjustments to stop policies, or even more so to routing practices, would give the transportation staff more flexibility to consolidate stops and improve efficiency while maintaining safe access. Currently with a bus stop for the median student, the typical student being located about 1/10 of a mile from their home, and on average, the district utilizing less than 1/3 of the permissible stop distance, so less than 1/3 of that up to 1/4 mile of the existing policy, that means that first and foremost, what we advise is that the district should focus in the near term on just safely maximizing the existing policy, and that sort of reviewing any policy changes there is a little bit more like medium-term or long-term discussion. And we also further advise that those future discussions of transportation efficiency should recognize this really important relationship between service standards and system costs. So the next major finding from the transportation study involved bell times. So the current transportation system is not evenly balanced across the 3 primary bell time service tiers. And there's also inadequate spacing between those bell times in order to run efficient service and service that runs on time. So transportation efficiency depends heavily on the district's ability to reuse vehicles across multiple school runs throughout the day. So if I have a driver, I have a vehicle, and I have a 3-tier system, I want to ensure that every single one of those drivers and vehicles is completing 3 morning trips and 3 afternoon trips. Currently, it's about, I think, 86% of vehicles that are able to complete those 6 runs a day, and that's largely based on in particular in the afternoon, that small spacing between the tiers. And also you'll notice the height of those bars. In a perfectly balanced system, they'd all be the same height. And so you'll notice that in Tier 1 in particular, and also Tier 2, that there's substantially more trips. So vehicles that need to be on the road transporting students than on Tier 3. And so that imbalance limits the district's ability to maximize each vehicle and creates additional transportation demand during peak periods, so additional costs. Even moving just a few schools from Tier 1 or Tier 2 to that 3rd tier would create significant efficiency gains by allowing the district to better leverage each driver and vehicle. Likewise, the variance in length of instructional day in the district, and therefore the variance in that spacing. So if you notice visually, those bars in the afternoon on the 3rd tier, instead of being one clean singular bar, like there is, in the morning, you see a bunch of smaller bars, and that's due to variation in the length of the instructional day. And that just creates extra complexity. It makes it harder for the transportation department to pair runs and make sure each vehicle completes 3 trips in the morning and the afternoon. And so it's hindering efficiency and also on-time performance. This issue is most apparent in the afternoon, where there's a very small window of time to complete that Tier 2 run before arriving for dismissal for the Tier 3 schools in the afternoon. Typically what we advise, what's common practice, is a 60-minute interval between your tiers. This allows about a 45-minute run. It gives you 15 minutes, we call it slack, for just like accounting for variations in traffic, or for one reason or another it's slow to load or unload at a school, a student's running to the bus stop, so you're waiting for them, whatever might happen, you need a little bit of wiggle room. And so that with a 60-minute interval, that allows 45 minutes to complete each trip without impairing your on-time performance or your vehicle utilization. Currently, if you saw on one of the earlier slides, the average trip duration is about 47 minutes within Milwaukee, and you have a smaller tier interval, especially in the afternoon. About 59% of your trips are running more than 45 minutes right now, and so this reveals that need to do one or both of 2 things. So constrain your trip durations through stop consolidation, or lengthening the amount of time between your bell time tiers to protect efficiency and support timely performance. On that note, we did examine service reliability on-time performance as part of the opportunity analysis. So among trips with GPS tracking for school arrivals, overall on-time performance was approximately 73%. However, there are 2 important caveats. First, roughly about 1/3 of trips do not have GPS tracking. So you don't know if they're on time or late. And this prevents ready analysis and performance management by the district transportation department. But also really important is that when trips lack GPS tracking, that means families can't monitor live service using the district's tracking app. So that's really consequential from just a customer service and family visibility standpoint. Additionally, I want you to, if you note just like the height of those bars, note that on-time performance degrades as the day goes on. This is typical. We see this in every 3-tier system, every urban system, so it's not unique to Milwaukee, but it's a common pattern, and that's particularly acute in the afternoon Tier 3. Again, a common pattern, but it means that we want to think about some system design changes to really address that. So there are 2 important priorities that come out of this from our perspective. The first is that we want to improve data quality so that performance can be measured accurately. We want to increase the GPS capture to make sure that families have visibility, the district has visibility. We know for every trip, or most trips, how service is running and how timely it is. And then the second is that focusing on operational improvements, especially in the afternoon for around Tier 3, is where the reliability challenges are the most significant and warrant the most consideration from the district. So, we ended up putting forth a series of recommendations based on our analysis to the district, and they fell in two broad categories. The first category includes district operational levers that can reduce transportation costs and improve efficiency. So we calculated really defined modeling on exact vehicle reductions, ride time duration reductions, and attendant decreases in wages to vendors, and therefore came up with some specific cost estimates. So this includes bell time balancing, improving seat utilization, offering parent payment in lieu as an option, and strategically leveraging public transit, again, as an option. The second category of opportunities or recommendations are around enabling infrastructure. So these investments improve the district's ability to monitor performance, manage vendors, communicate with families, and sustain improvements over time. So these are sometimes investments that unlock the cost savings, the service improvements in those direct levers. In our experience, enabling infrastructure is what determines whether operational savings are realized and maintained. So this slide includes 4 primary efficiency opportunities that we identified. And, before discussing them individually, I just want to note that, the savings estimates, they're not additive. So each one of these interventions was modeled independently, and they're also not guaranteed, right? So each opportunity requires strong implementation. It might require some policy or practice changes, and then sustained focus in order to achieve success. And you'll notice in fine print at the bottom, it says theoretically possible savings. In our experience, because again, we've worked with many districts across the country, you're unlikely to reach that number that we've listed here, because these are lab settings, right? When you get to the reality around implementing it exactly, even if you're, really assertive in your posture, you're not going to quite realize that number. But we wanted to size each opportunity to understand what's theoretically possible if we wanted to lean in here and implement each of these opportunities. So the first around bell time balancing. Today, demand is concentrated in tiers 1 and 2, limiting the ability to utilize vehicles. We modeled targeted bell time adjustments for 10 schools to illustrate the potential benefit of creating a more balanced distribution of trips. And I think roughly 7 of those schools were moved 15 minutes or less off their current bell time. Those changes would reduce fleet requirements and generate approximately $4.2 million in annual savings. These are annual recurring savings rather than one-time savings across the board for all of these. And bell time balancing is also highly synergistic with other opportunities on this slide. So it's something that really supports the attainment of other savings. The second is seat utilization. This represents the largest in terms of just financial opportunity that we identified in the analysis. Today, the typical trip has 51% of seats filled with planned riders. That doesn't mean they actually rode. It means that we're assigning students to fill about half of seats on vehicles. By strategically consolidating stops, and routes, and moving average utilization from planning to fill 51% of seats to planning to fill 60% of seats, the district could save up to $11.1 million annually. That's the equivalent of adding 4 riders on each trip, just to give you a sense of it. Right now, there's about 17 students on average across each trip, so it'd be moving to 21 planned riders on each trip is what it would take to get these savings. Third, we suggested offering parent payment in lieu as an optional primary mode. We modeled, for all of these, we had a whole bunch of different models, and the savings here are the ones that we recommended to the district as the most auspicious and feasible. So for parent payment, what we modeled was a program focusing on offering this to students who receive transportation as a related service, since the cost to transport those students is significantly higher. So if you assume a 25% participation rate among eligible families, the district could save up to $2.4 million annually, and that also gives those families an additional transportation option. Finally, Public transit. So many Milwaukee Public School high school students have viable public transit journeys, but the economics depend heavily on the fare rate, which the district does not set. At the district's current pass cost, public transit is generally not cost efficient. If MPS can negotiate a lower rate with the Public Transit Authority to bring pricing closer in line with the reduced youth fare or the fare that's provided for local college students, then public transit becomes much more financially attractive for the district. However, transit alone produces relatively modest savings, and that's because your high school trips are concentrated in your second tier. And your peak demand is in tier 1. So you're just overall, you're still going to have to run the same number of vehicles. You'll just have lower demand in tier 2. So you're not having much cost savings. The transit opportunity that we've shown here with $2.7 million annually reflects the potential value of reducing dedicated yellow bus service through expanded transit use. But the actual savings would require, students to participate, negotiating a better fare structure with your public transit authority, and then also just ensuring that the district does the attendant reduction in vehicles and routes. So the key takeaway across all these opportunities is that there are multiple pathways. No single strategy is a silver bullet. But taken together, the opportunities provide meaningful savings opportunities for maintaining student access at the same time while we increase efficiency. The last piece that I'll cover tonight is around, if the previous slide was on what to improve, this slide is about how to sustain the improvement, is a good way to think about it. So there are several foundational capabilities that deserve attention. Improved data governance to strengthen transportation planning, centralized communication to create a more consistent experience for families and reduce the burden on office staff, who are right now the ones answering a lot of these calls and questions from families, enhanced tracking and GPS visibility to improve oversight and accountability for vendors, performance management tools that, again, enable more systemic accountability for vendors, and strategic automation to allow staff to spend less time on these manual administrative processes and more time actually designing and guaranteeing service reliability. One recommendation that's in here, the second one, I think just deserves a little bit more attention, and that's the creation of a centralized transportation operations center. So today, as I mentioned, transportation issues are often addressed through a decentralized process. So families are advised to contact the vendor directly, or they contact their school. What that means is that when it gets escalated to the central transportation function, it's reactive. It's already been going on for a while, and we're losing the ability to have both a consistent experience across all of our schools for all of our families, but then also to learn from what are the challenges and questions that families are bringing forward so that we can continuously improve our system. So a centralized model will improve that consistency. It'd allow for proactive monitoring. It would establish some response standards, because right now one vendor might be responsive, you might be on hold for 30 seconds, another one, it might be 5 minutes, and you might get someone very short that maybe doesn't espouse the district, brand or, customer service that we would expect. And then also this would strengthen vendor accountability by creating a single operational view of transportation performance. So as the district modernizes transportation services, should they seek to move forward with some of the recommendations we made around, for instance, pursuing stop consolidation or differentiating modal offerings, there's increased need for the district to take on a stronger role around family response and customer service. We had, as the superintendent had mentioned, completed the opportunity analysis in the winter and initially presented these immediate and for the next school year recommendations in the winter and spring. So now that we're preparing at the conclusion, after the conclusion of the 26-27 school year, I would suggest to the board to please consider viewing this slide as an implementation roadmap rather than a sequence of immediate next steps. So some initiatives like stop consolidation or ridership audits, GPS tracking improvements, stronger operational monitoring, that should move forward. Our position is still the district should seek to move forward with those now. Whereas others, such as potentially parent payment or expanding public transit or bell time adjustments, that might require additional planning and stakeholder engagement. The key takeaway is that the district has multiple opportunities available, and the focus now, which you'll hear from the team, is on determining which strategies best align with the district's priorities and implementing them in a deliberate and phased manner. In closing, the district's operating a highly complex system with a high level of service to families. There are robust opportunities to improve, both from an efficiency and a service reliability standpoint. The most successful districts that we work with, and work with many across the country, it's not about spending the least on transportation or the most. It's about aligning your service expectations with your operational practices around a performance management system and a clear strategy. So we appreciate the opportunity we've had to work with the transportation team as we've conducted this study, and I will be happy to answer any questions after Chief Terza and Director Ferfer finish their presentation.
We're just waiting for administration to get ready. Gotcha, not a problem. Okay.
Director Jackson and members of the committee, Michael Terza, Interim Chief Operations Officer. With me is Mr. David Fafarek, Senior Director of Business Services and Transportation. Thank you for the opportunity to present a focused review of pupil transportation. As Ms. Stillman mentioned, the analysis was initially scheduled for April. The lack of time before the start of the school year may limit some of the adjustments and recommendations that we can implement. Nevertheless, building on Formative's opportunity analysis, we will examine some of the direct and enabling levers identified by Formative. Levers such as bell times, seat utilization, and public transit will be highlighted, as well as actions to improve the overall operations and enable future transportation savings to be sustained. Any change that we make, we know, is going to be difficult. Whenever we try to do a change of policy or practice, there's probably somebody you're going to impact. And so what we have tried to do in our analysis is to do potential changes that have little impact or no impact on people, or let me rephrase that a little bit, impact that is managed and not against any board policy or severe practice. The purpose of this review is to identify cost savings for the FY27 school year and potential savings for the FY28 school year. In addition, transportation policies, practices that can be implemented to improve the efficiency and responsiveness of pupil transportation will be presented. While some actions can be implemented for the 27 school year, over the next 6 months, a full-scale review, including extensive school and community input, will be undertaken. Significant cost savings can be realized, but will require significant outreach to and buy-in from the various stakeholders of pupil transportation. We view this presentation as a first step. This slide provides some basic transportation data. I would like to note some items, such as the cost of transportation, which is just about $79 million. Some of the high cost per pupil ridership that we have, such as our homeless population, which is almost $5,000 a year per student, and some special education students that are at almost $2,800 per year. The average cost of transportation for a bus is between $90,000 and $110,000 annually. For FY27, transportation was budgeted at $75.2 million. This requires a reduction from the $79 million that was allocated in the FY26 budget. In order to achieve these types of savings, buses must be removed from service. You cannot get those kinds of savings without actually taking buses physically off the road. This can only be done by adjusting some of the current practices used in pupil transportation. I will now turn it over to Mr. Fafaric, who will review proposed actions used in pupil transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Terza. Chair Jackson, members of the committee, David Fafaric, Senior Director of Business Transportation Services. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to walk through the next grouping of slides. And I just want to point out that I think Ms. Dillman did a tremendous job articulating both the complexities of the transportation system and by identifying some of the opportunities. Some of them might be familiar with past conversations that we've had on this board floor previously. But what I would like to do moving forward is to provide some illustrations on how we might be able to implement this, both from an FY27 framework and then further in FY28 and beyond framework. And that's how the next grouping of slides will be broken up. The first slide that you see here is really discussing what Ms. Tillman was talking about, and we've alluded to in the past about compression. And what we see there is really the fact that, particularly in the third tier, we're seeing on-time performance-related issues due to effectively a lack of spacing between the second and third tiers. We're making some recommendations in this slide deck that really allows us, hopefully, if we were to standardize the third tier times, to give the drivers and the vendors just a little bit more time to complete that second tier run so that they can get to those third tier schools on time. The variance in the recommendations, obviously short-term and long-term, really is to try to standardize a 4:15 dismissal. And with that, some of them might not be practical for now. And I think due to the timing that we have right now with the school year, it would be advisable that we recommend maybe starting with a 5-minute shift for schools that might be more receptive and able to do that, given that we're already in June. The goal, obviously, is to just provide a little bit more time between that second tier, which is, even though the bell is 3:25, we're dismissing really by 3:35, and we're expected to be at some of these schools at 3:55. That's a 20-minute run, and what we had kind of talked about earlier is, in some instances, you need 35, 40 minutes at a minimum just to complete the run. The second lever that we're looking to pull is related to centralizing customer service operations. As it kind of was alluded to before, we have a very lean staff. The staff is what we call generalists, and those staff members not only have to take customer service related calls, but they also do routing and they do contract compliance. That really does spread us pretty thin, and there is a highly advisable recommendation that we centralize some more of our customer service operations, not only to take the burden off of schools so that they don't have to take those calls, but to really reduce the variability with the responses on the bus company side. As you can imagine, the cost component for an RFP does include staffing of customer service at the contractor side. So if we were to centralize some of those operations, we should anticipate at least some leveling off or reduction in cost related to staffing bus companies and us footing some of the bill there. One of the other probably more substantial recommendations is this concept of improving bus utilization. In order to improve bus utilization, given that you really have a 30 to 40-minute window, is you have to reduce variability. You have to get less stops per route so that you can effectively get from point A to point B and C in a timely manner. So on-time performance is severely impacted by the number of stops that we have on a route. The number of stops that we have on a route is impacted by the proximity that we have for students walking from their residence to a stop. And as it was mentioned a little bit earlier, we give preference as a policy to kindergarten students, and with a large component of K-8 schools, what you see is a high degree of stop placement throughout the city. Understanding that we also live in a really very urban environment, we have historically had a high number of what we call no-cross streets, and that was a reference that we used from the Milwaukee Safety Commission that has kind of evolved our framework over the years. So I think some of the recommendations that we're having now is to reduce the number of stops, perhaps ask students to walk a couple extra blocks, and at that point, reevaluate what we call no cross streets. I don't think there's ever going to be a recommendation that we have students crossing major thoroughfares like Capitol or Hampton, but I think some sort of reoccurring evaluation of the street volume and traffic could lead us down a path of consolidating stops, which again, the more stops we can consolidate, the less buses are on the road, the lower our costs for transportation become. Here's, again, this is part of that discussion, and this is specifically dealing with eliminating nearest corner policies and really trying to encourage quarter mile and half a mile. Again, these are not new enhanced policies. It's finding frameworks to be a little bit more efficient in following the frameworks that we have by addressing some of the barriers to that quarter mile and half mile policy that is already in effect. Another one of the levers that I think are relatively easy to accommodate would be what we would call sharing of vans and combining of schools that are on similar tiers. And so what you'll see here is what we currently do is we have a practice of not combining two different schools into a vehicle for a lot of very logical reasons. But that may not be as pertinent or compelling in a scenario where you've got one student going to a school because maybe they're displaced or because it's a special ed assignment that is relatively far from school. In those instances, we typically have less than 4 students in a vehicle anyways. And so it might be really advantageous for us financially to combine a Trowbridge and a Fernwood that are both on the first tier, that have the same bell schedule, and that would require a little bit of an operational change on our end where we might have to drop off one of the students 5 to 10 minutes early so that we can get to the second school on time. And here's some examples that we can articulate, and this is the Fernwood, Trowbridge, the Engelberg, and Emerson, schools that have the same tier, relatively close, low load count from a vehicle standpoint that could allow us to do some sort of consolidations and save us significant amounts of money. And then there are just operational investments. These are levers that we're going to pull on our end due to the analysis that really help us improve the quality of the services that are being provided. I think a lot of what Formative was identifying in their analysis were things that we were already identifying and facilitating to various degrees of priority, and I'll just list them off real quick. When we talk about GPS, not being able to track GPS, it's not that they don't have a GPS unit on the vehicle. There are GPS units on all of the vehicles. The problem is things like switch outs. When a driver calls in on a Tuesday and another driver's got to pick up the route, you've got to reaffiliate. And so the driver has a current requirement where they need to log in and say, I am running Route 24 to Engelberg. If they haven't done that affiliation in the morning, well then the GPS that we're looking at becomes much more cumbersome, and then things like the parent app become not usable. And so part of our goal is to make sure that the switch out in the mornings and the other part that is highlighted in this investment are just making sure that the geofences, the zones around the school accurately reflect where buses are pulling up to unload and load, because if those geozones aren't correct, we're not pinging properly and triggering an event that is measurable or able to be monitored. Another enhanced data quality measure would be trying to find better ways of ridership tracking, and we've talked about this in the past, maybe using some in some controlled population groups, ways to validate ridership through student IDs or the like, because that is a way to ensure that we are busing what we think we're busing, and if we're not busing those students, that we take them off the bus rolls and we can go ahead and reduce total bus counts, which again is going to be a reflection on our expenditure line. Of course, enhanced GPS dashboards, I think that it goes without saying. It's not only that we need to see it, we need to make sure that families see it on the parent app, and we frankly need to make sure that schools have an access point so that they can see what's happening for their buses in real time. And so we're working on just trying to enhance annually those offerings as we get more mature in the technological space for which that we operate. We talked a little bit about the customer service piece prior, but it also does include using what we call an opt-out system. We're currently through the parent portal and the Where's the Bus, we require families to opt in. It is advisable that we kind of start with an opt-in scenario and we have families opt out. That maximizes account usage and creation, and it kind of eliminates the need for families to jump through hoops to access the technologies that we're already offering. And then, of course, these third-tier bell change scenarios are obviously going to come to help from an on-time performance standpoint, which is going to enhance our customer service offering. Finally, we're incorporating any of these changes into our upcoming RFPs, which have a contractor performance metric built into it. And so as we evolve and create new metrics and ways of exploring how we monitor our companies, we're incorporating those into our contracts so that we can apply liquidated damages or other means of addressing those things structurally. Finally, we can get into operational investments, and these are kind of bigger scale initiatives. And so as we kind of walk through these, it's examining our district eligibility policies from a transportation standpoint. That's a big fish. There's lots of different school types and policies depending upon the school type. Examining how we do special ed assignments, and of course transportation becomes a significant cost item if we're transporting students from significant distances, whether they're special ed or not, just generally student assignments. I mean, we are a highly choice environment, which then reduces this idea of density, and that leads to the lower bus utilization. Obviously, if you don't have high volumes of students in a neighborhood, it becomes hard to get them all on a bus unless you're traveling significant distances and getting onesie-twosies across the city. So obviously student assignment becomes pretty instrumental in how we address bus utilization and again reduce our transportation costs. Examining bell schedules, examining our operational practices, things such as our customer service center potential, and in addition, revising things like our transportation appeal process, which is something we've been doing over the last few months that's going to have a pretty significant impact on how we facilitate the transportation for those families that might have experienced some sort of hardship or moved out of a particular transportation region. And then, of course, trying to just make sure that we're soliciting community input and outreach throughout the process and aligning it with some of these other studies that we have going on at the same time, namely the Long-Range Facility Master Plan. What you're going to see here is really just a table that's going to identify the things that we just talked about for potentially FY27 or bleeding into FY28, and the degree of difficulty that we would kind of assume that this might entail. And I won't go too much into it, but you can kind of see that adjusting bell schedules has a high impact, but of course it's a very difficult undertaking from an ease of implementation, and we've been down this roadmap a few times before, so I think we can all kind of see how that plays out. And then there's some of these that are just a little bit easier. Revising the transportation appeal policy, it's already done. We've got recommendations that are going to be facilitated in that matter. Improving the GPS capture rates. These are just technological enhancements that we need to make sure that we're accounting for on our end, and then amend some of our FY27 RFP performance metrics. Finally, we've got some FY28 proposals. These are a little bit more longer term. And as Ms. Dillman had talked about, MCTS usage depends on the cost of the bus. And, you know, we don't really have a lot of say in the short term in that, but I think that lobbying, it becomes a factor for us when we're trying to do comparability studies with other municipalities or school districts that have better discounts. And there's another thing we've been down this path before, and so I think it's worth readdressing as the Milwaukee County Transit leadership has changed recently, and there's new opportunities not only to be collaborative, but to try to infuse maybe some dollars into their infrastructure for their viability and to encourage lifelong riders. I think the other part of this, and you've seen over the last few years, is just how do we incrementally increase county transit usage while still trying to remain efficient with the yellow bus. We're never going to get to that place where everybody's riding on the county transit. And currently, as Ms. Dillman had mentioned, the high school students are on second tier. So at some point, you can only take so many kids off before you're reducing efficiency. Now, if you take everybody off, then you've got to move first tiers and third tiers to second tiers and do all kinds of restructuring. But I do think there's still an opportunity. There's some low-hanging fruit where you can reduce ridership at that second tier, move some of those riders into the county transit model, and see some efficiencies. And then we can kind of walk through that with some of the illustration that you'll see in the next couple slides. One of the recommendations is using that kind of MCTS model for students that become out of region, right? And so as you become ineligible for yellow bus services, we're currently asking families to transfer to other schools. There might be, and that other school might then put that student on another yellow bus that we hadn't already planned for. So I think part of the strategy might be trying to stabilize enrollment and use county transit for out of region students to keep them in their school buildings and not have to purchase another yellow bus for $100,000 and instead use the county transit model. You can see a cost component for that. Finally, we get into this bell schedule component, and this first slide, what you see is, this is after you implement the first couple levers. So I don't want to get too bogged down in all the numbers, but what you see is the first column is the tiers, first, second, and third. The second column is where we're at right now. That third column is going to be, well, what happens if we start to expand walk to stop? And if we start to expand walk to stop, you start to reduce stops, then you start to reduce buses, and now you have less buses on the road at first, second, and third tier. The final column is what happens if you also implement more county transit for those out-of-region scenarios, and this is where you then start to see your total bus count diminish and go down. We're never going to be able to get lower than the highest bus number in a tier. So in the case of that final column way to the right, you're always going to have 733 buses because that's the critical tier, tier 1, but you don't have complete efficiency because you only have 667 second tiers and 614 third tiers. So even if we implement the walk to stop analysis and we implement a few of the out of region county transit students, you have to think about distribution, and I think that's where the next slide goes into. And this is again taking first tiers and moving them to third tiers, taking the critical tier and moving them to a tier where they have less bus counts so that you can equalize, with the goal as being maybe not exact, but close to an even distribution between tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And what you see, and by the way, the example here, these are not specific recommendations of schools, it's just an illustration. It's just to say, if you were to take a couple schools, this is the impact. We're not suggesting these particular schools. It was used as just a mechanism to illustrate the point. But what you can see is if you were to move those 3 schools to a third tier, you go from 733 buses to 682. That's a difference of 51 buses. And again, at roughly $90,000 to $100,000 a bus, that's, we're talking millions of dollars. And so this is just a good illustration of how you try to equalize the tiers between first, second, and third. And then, of course, you have to space between the tiers so that you can get a good 35 to 40-minute run so that each run is adequately getting as full as possible within those 30 minutes. And then finally, you'll see, using all of those levers, we create a redistribution of runs that is roughly equal across the tiers. And we're not necessarily suggesting that all of these levers, as Ms. Dillman had mentioned, but every incremental approach towards this final table is going to result in significant savings for the district from a transportation standpoint. And then finally, the operational investments. Just like we have the short-term investments, we also have long-term investments that we're trying to facilitate just and prioritize regardless to improve our operations. And that goes into trying to maximize our Medicaid reimbursement rate. There's some rules that kind of go with how you can claim Medicaid, and it requires relatively daily ridership tracking. So that might be in line with some of the other short-term measures where we start to pilot ridership tracking with student IDs so that we can move down a rabbit hole of really trying to maximize our Medicaid claims through validating ridership. Accurate counting of ridership, that's something every year for state aid purposes. If we can't validate ridership, we don't count them. Obviously, we don't get dinged. We take the kids out that we can't validate, but the more we can validate, the more we can get from state aid reimbursement as well. Of course, enhanced data quality, exploring ridership applications for all kinds of good reasons. Not only is it financially beneficial, but I can't tell you how many calls we get about where is my student. And so if we have validated ridership, it does equate to higher quality of service, lower stress for families, and just a better ecosystem from a transportation standpoint. We talked about the centralized transportation operations. There's all kinds of benefits. I won't get too much into it except to say that we really have to man the phones. So contract compliance a lot of times requires leaving the office and getting into a terminal at a company and saying, what are you doing and how are you doing it? But if our operations require us to be ready for calls, and we only have 6 to 7 people that can take the calls, then there's diminished opportunities to be proactive in our approach to solving problems. And of course, then we're being reactive. And so I do think the customer service model is a winner. I think it really does take a lot of work off of school staff. And I think in the long run, it could be not only cost neutral, it could allow us to specialize our operations so that we have routers that focus on consolidating stops a little bit more. And we have contract compliance folks that focus on, evaluating the effectiveness of the service by our contractors. And then we have a separate branch of customer service that answers phones and provides really solid customer service offerings to families that do need to call. One of the worst things that I have to encounter is families that have to call a company to get an answer when I should have the answer. And we do have the technology to do it. I think now sometimes it's just making sure that we invest in the appropriate staffing to do the job appropriately. And then, of course, the last piece is just performance dashboards to make it as transparent and comprehensive as possible so we know what's happening, why it's happening, and how to make improvements and process improvements from a secular standpoint annually. With that, there's this last multi-generational plan table, and this, again, just talks about the kind of the relative ease or difficulty, and I'll just highlight one. Even if you were to move kids to county transit, that requires a lot. It requires county transit to build an infrastructure, to have a labor pool, to buy equipment, to make sure that they have ample service to provide not only for MPS, but also for the community at large. And they typically try to push back and say they need 8 to 10 months to do anything major. So I think that's one of those that is not a FY27 lever, but there's always the opportunity to really try to build a much more comprehensive and a partnership. And with that, I think it's the end of the presentation, and I'd be glad to take questions.
All righty. Is there any members of the public that have any comments?
Do not have any speaker slips on this item.
Okay. Any committee members? Yes. Director Herndon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about some of this in that how would you handle the change that could potentially be made with our special needs students?
Administration.
Director Herndon, Chair Jackson, members of the committee, David Feiferick, Director of Business and Transportation Services. Obviously, IEP decisions are made within the realm of the IEP teams. Part of what we've been working with Formative is to create a standard and a working living document where we kind of provide guidance and structure and best practices. And I don't know if Ms. Dillman wanted to speak to this at all, because this is an ongoing initiative that we have right now as we speak in how we are aligning transportation knowledge expertise within the framework of an IEP team decision.
Director Herndon?
Director Herndon, Chair Jackson, and members of the committee. So to elaborate on the point that David was bringing up, we've been engaged in lots of cross-functional planning, learning, professional development, and exploration of our current processes and data around serving students who receive transportation as a related service, really with an eye on ensuring, one, we have shared understanding about what does access to the least restrictive environment look like within the transportation setting. How are we currently ensuring consistent policy but student-centered decision-making? And then how is the transportation department as the related services provider executing and enacting those accommodations for transportation? So we've developed a few frameworks, again, looking at research around best practice and also artifacts from other districts across the country to outline a draft framework for providing guidance to IEP teams for how they could go through thinking through student transportation accommodations. So that includes areas such as the stop style. Does the student require curb-to-curb service? Could they be well served by a closest, safest corner, or is a neighborhood style stop what they need? We looked at release requirements. Could a student be released independently, meaning they get off the vehicle on their own? Do they need to have eye to eye, so an adult caregiver is visible, or do they need to actually like hand to hand, imagine a baton pass, where there's an adult caregiver who's right there at the vehicle side, ready to receive the student based on their mobility or other disability needs. So there's a whole bunch of areas where we've sort of mapped out, here's what the accommodation could look like, a definition of it. Here's the type of student profile or needs that would be well served by that particular type of accommodation, and then a general like decision-making flow for how to think through all these different design considerations.
Thank you very much for that information, because my concern is that we have so many children with special needs, and many of them, I would say, would be somewhat severe, especially the little guys, you know. So the last thing I'd want to see is, as we would try to move the marker, which does need to be moved, I'm not arguing that point at all. It's just that I want to make sure that we look out for our special needs students, and we all recognize that we have an inordinate large number of them to take care of. At the same time, our teachers, our staff, already do a tremendous job in that area, and I would hope that we wouldn't be mounting more responsibilities on them. That's it. Thank you.
Director Fons?
If I remember correctly, we used to transport a lot of students with MCTS. What were the problems that had us move away from that model? So, in other words, why would did something change, you know?
Director Fons, Chair Jackson, members of the committee, David Pfeiffer, Senior Director, Business Transportation Services. It was about 12, 13 years ago. The McKinsey report was a study that came out that suggested some kind of discussion with county transit in the past, because it was identified in a prior study that they did not give us ample discounts relative to Chicago, Minneapolis, or others. And the board at that time elected to apply its legislative pressure by saying you will or we shall move services from county transit to yellow bus. At that time, we moved $5 million of services from county transit to yellow bus, and we haven't really moved the needle back since for a variety of reasons. So that's the official reason why that had occurred in, I want to say, 2012, maybe.
Director Fons?
Another issue, yeah. So both of my students, my children, use the bus services, and I would say that the decentralization program that we have now has come in handy, where they would just you'd be on the phone, you call, hey, we have an issue, and they get you right to the local vendor. Now, that's worked well for me, but I've had complaints from constituents where it didn't work out well. But again, anecdotally, I had very good experience with it, but other people have not. So I would imagine that would be an issue of how the local vendor deals with the issue. So I can see the pluses and minuses of centralization. But I haven't seen the whole study, so I would, that would be interesting. Any comments on that, or?
Administration.
Director Fons, Director Jackson, I think what we would be striving for is consistency in the message, consistency in the standard operating procedures. Again, in probably anything you do, somebody does it well, somebody does it badly. Right. And so I think our focus with having a centralized customer service is that the parent always gets the same type of message, gets the same type of service. And then from there, we can find out whether or not a company or not is doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I've had calls in the morning with panicked parents, right? Where's my kid? I can't get in contact with anyone. Those kinds of things.
Director Fons, Chair Jackson, members of the committee, David Pfeiffer. Another just point of emphasis is, we talk about GPS and maybe some of the struggles we've had, but technology has come a long way. So we now have the ability to literally give an answer within seconds of a call. So, it works tremendously better when you have one message, one method of delivering the message, and a technology interface that is, effectively there to support that message. What you get is obviously when you tell somebody to call someone else, you don't know if they're using the tools in the toolbox.
Anecdotally, again, we had problems with the GPS program just this month in our family, but over the year it was fine. So I don't know if there was a new vendor or something was affected. Again, that's one anecdote, but it was uneven.
Director Zumber.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I wanted to piggyback off of your comments about MCTS. I know there's a difference because when I've spoken with bus drivers, they seem to differentiate against dedicated high school routes versus routes that service the entire community that high school students ride. And so I don't know if you recall, when we used to have more MCTS routes, were they those dedicated routes, or were they routes that students rode with everyone else?
Directors on board, Director Jackson, back in 2012 when we moved away from the county transit. Before that, there used to be what was called trippers. Yep. Okay, and so they would be dedicated buses going to a particular high school. And so one of the problems that we had with that is that, many times that was beginning to interfere with their normal business ridership type of thing. And so, so that was one of the conflicts that we had at the time with the county transit. And I think that kind of helped the board move towards the direction that they did.
So when we're talking about this, are we imagining negotiating trippers, or are we imagining negotiating better rates for existing routes?
Director Zomber, Chair Jackson, members of the committee, David Pfeiffer. We have to be careful. County Transit cannot subsidize a particular entity over others, and so the fact that they have trippers is typically a product of volume. So they place additional vehicles where the demand is there. So the de facto result is if you put a lot of kids in a specific area in front of a school, they're going to dedicate a bus to get them to a transfer point. They will never say that they're subsidizing because they would then lose federal funding if they're earmarking federal funding for the school system as opposed to the community. But the results are effectively the same.
Yes, Director Zumber.
Okay. That's helpful to understand. Thank you for that clarification. So I guess when we were doing the long-range facilities plan meetings with Perkins Eastman, transportation came up in one of our last meetings. It wasn't the final meeting. And they did talk about, I think, Minneapolis, but I know Boston also does it as well, where they have free bus passes, or they have bus passes for all of their students. And I know you probably have familiarity with both, Dr. Caselius. And I wish every high school student in Milwaukee Public Schools could have access to those bus passes. I think that's very, that's very liberating. And it's also good for our community, for students to have that public transportation literacy, and for us to nurture the culture of public transportation, because it is dying in this city, and we know MCTS is really struggling financially, and maybe part of that is because we also have a role to play in teaching young people in the city how to use public transportation. However, I say that, but I also, in that same meeting, people were opposed to putting students on buses because there's a lot of safety concerns. And so I know we've experienced issues, Director Pfeifferich and I have had to navigate issues where there were behavior issues on city buses or county buses. And there's like a tension between the drivers and the transit system want us to do more to manage behavior, and our parents want the transit system to do more to manage behavior that aren't student behavior. So it's definitely something that I think is going to take more discussions, but I'm glad we're having the conversation because I do think it's really important, and I think it's really powerful for students to have a way to navigate around the city, especially our older students. So thank you for starting those conversations. I know that's a hard one to keep working on, but I think one question I had, I know we said offer parent payment. One possibility would be offering parent payment in lieu of transportation. Is that only for parents who, or families that are already using the bus? Because what I'm imagining is we have some families that have students who are eligible for transportation that just opt not to. Maybe they're kindergarten, first grade. They're like, I don't know if my kid's ready to go on the bus. Would we be offering, how do you manage? Because then it could actually cost more money if we're paying people that are just automatically opting not to transport.
Director Zambor, Director Jackson, I think that points out that that's a kind of a complex from a number of issues, from equity issues, from access issues, and things like that. So that's why we are including that in the study later on for 28, because we would want to ask the community what their thoughts are. We had done that in the past, basically back in the early 2000s. We tried this. It worked for a while, but then you come into situations where the parent, maybe car broke down or had some kind of other problems, and so you have to be very careful and very precise of how you run it. So that's something that we're going to be looking at over the course of the next year.
Director Zambor, Director Jackson, members of the committee, Mary Dillman with Formative. To answer your question around the modeling, that's a really important point that you want to ensure it's one expanding option. So importantly for both transit and for parent payment, what Formative modeled and recommended is that it's an additional option for families, not their only choice. So there's a big difference from saying high schoolers from now on your only option is public transit versus you can take routed service or you could opt into public transit. And if you have a public transit pass, one of the many benefits is that you can not only use it for home to school, but to home to activity, to dual enrollment, to experience all the wonderful offerings that Milwaukee has to offer. On the parent payment in lieu, we specifically, the typical student lives just over 3 miles from their school of assignment. And so what we modeled was making an eligibility criteria that a student needs to live at least 4 miles away from their school of assignment, and that ensures you're not hollowing out routes, and then therefore actually exacerbating your low seat utilization issue. And so it's the students that live farther away, the bus has to go out of its way to go get them and bring them to school. It adds time and expense, and so it ensures that even if it's just a handful of families that opt in, that it'll ultimately be cost savings for the district. We modeled using the federal reimbursement mileage rate, so it's a differential rate based on how far away families are. They're only compensated for days students are in attendance, and that there's really an important, to the point that Chief Terza brought up, and a mechanism for opting back into routed service should something, come up, and that also that attendance is monitored regularly to ensure that a family has chosen parent payment in lieu. They thought it would be a good strategy, but it's actually a barrier to regular attendance. What's most important is safe and regular attendance for our students. And so the district would monitor that and then determine if they need to put the student back on routed service.
Director Zumber?
Thank you. Okay, just a couple more things.
Absolutely.
And then I know we have another meeting after this, and we've got students in the audience, so I just want to but this is an important topic. Okay, I'm just going to say one more thing about MCTS. I think the other thing that parents really worry about is the transfers and where the transfers are located. And so if there's a way to prioritize routes that don't have that transfer, that might help ease parents' minds with that. You look like you have a...
Director Zomber, Chair Jackson, members of the committee, David Pfeifferich. If you'll look at the presentation in your leisure, you'll notice that we specifically recommended county transit as a longer-term strategy for those students that do not transfer.
And then really quickly, I am a morning bird, but whatever and I know where this is not a recommendation, I just want to thank you for not making this a recommendation. I think anything earlier than that 7:15 is just not, if we can just not do that. So thank you for recommending later and not earlier. And then I guess that last question is, what do you expect future conversations around this to be? What can kind of our school community expect?
Directors on board, Director Jackson, as I indicated in my few remarks, over the course of probably the next 6 months, we're going to do a comprehensive outreach to the various stakeholders that use transportation or is impacted by transportation. We look at, the district councils, the school councils. I think over the course of the budget hearings and things like that, we developed some modeling as far as who to go see, and we'll work with community engagement to set up the meetings. So we would hope that we get a robust outreach to families and staff. Our plan would be to present to the board some initial findings possibly in December. Okay, and so that would have an impact directly on the next year's budget.
Superintendent.
Chair Jackson, Director Zambor, I just want to thank Formative and our transportation team, Mr. Terza and Mr. Pfeifferich, for this tremendous presentation. Nobody wants to take on transportation. It's a barrier, but it is also almost $80 million. And we know that we can achieve better efficiency, better on-time performance. Next year, we're going to be looking at attendance, and we want our children to be attending school. We want them to be able to get breakfast and not be late, so that we can get reimbursed for the breakfast and also that they can fill their tummies and be ready to learn. So I think that there are a number of benefits that can come from changing some of these bell times and looking at some of these efficiencies and renegotiating with our county partners. Like you said, in Minneapolis, I was high school superintendent and helped negotiate getting our kids off of the yellow buses and onto Metro Transit. In Boston, we also had a very efficient system of trains and buses to be able to use those, and students actually loved having these passes because it gave them more independence and freedom. So there's a lot of benefits that can come from this study, and like Mr. Terza said, we will take the next 6 months to really look at some of these changes. But I do want to be transparent that I do believe some of the changes around 5 minutes and bell times, I want to start having conversations with some of the schools to be able to talk to their parent councils and see if we can get a few that might be interested in moving for greater efficiency efficiency, because it means that then their kids will actually have on-time buses in the afternoon. And so if there's some things that we can do where it's not too much pain, I'd like to begin to start having those real serious conversations with our principals. We did speak with MTEA about it. We also have spoken with our ASC and principals group and principals advisory group, and so we're looking forward to their feedback, and we'll come back and continue to update the board on any progress that we're making. Thank you.
Anything else, Director Zomber? No, okay. Mr. Chaser.
Thank you, Chair Jackson, Matt Chasen, Hawaii. Real quickly, my understanding from our website is that we currently have schools that don't offer yellow bus service and only allow transportation using WISCO cards. Is that a fair statement based on what's on our website today?
Administration.
Mr. Chasen, Chair Jackson, members of the committee, we do have a few schools, high schools, primarily Reagan, Audubon High School, naming a few. There's a few others. If you want me to give a comprehensive list, I'd be glad to do that. Grappy being another that use county transit exclusively outside of students with disabilities or IEPs.
Certainly, and I just make the point that it is not foreign to our system currently, that if one of the recommendations is something that we have at some of our schools right now. Additionally, I'm just wondering if we could spend a couple of moments differentiating between the walk to stop policy versus the transportation zone policy. I'm going to use an extreme example, but I think it's illustrative. We have a walk to stop policy for middle school of half a mile, and my understanding is that we are guaranteeing that if you live at house A, your bus stop will be no more than half a mile away. Andrew Douglas is a citywide middle, and we will not provide transportation to that school unless you are at least 2 miles away from that school. And what I see is under the global transportation zone policy that we have, I think we have instances where we incentivize students and families making choices that make them pick schools further away. We, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, we cap our transportation zone policy at 7 miles. But there's no state statute that requires us to transport students that far. And so every decision we're making here is within a set of policies that we have self-selected, that we have the levers internally to adjust. And I wasn't sure if you had any comments on anything with respect to walk to stop versus those transportation zones and the impact that has on family choices for schools that they may live very nearby, but because of the transportation policy, they will not select.
Administration.
Mr. Chasen, Chair Jackson, members of the committee, David Feiferick. Everything that Mr. Chasen said is absolutely correct, and you could even take that a little bit further and say students who may have a special need, but they don't necessarily need door-to-door busing, may get door-to-door busing because of a 1 mile or a 2 mile walk zone policy that the district has. So there are, in fact, instances in many cases where students will be selecting a school that is further away from their home in order to avoid walking, especially given we're in extreme weather conditions the vast majority of the year. So that is, in fact, the case. And it is true that we inherently are creating our policies. There's no state statute as a city of the first class that says we can't do something different. So we are electing to have those policies. They've been in place since I've been here, and they're obviously able to be changed.
Anything else? All right. Just a comment from myself. So, of course, keeping student-centered focus, that's what it is. And I'm all about the savings of the cost of $80 million, but I think one thing that we need to recommend and keep in mind is that the safety. So we talk about stops, consolidation, and the walking more a few blocks. Now we know the city of Milwaukee and all neighborhoods are not built the same. So safety is an issue where currently a lot of adults don't want to walk through certain neighborhoods. So we got to keep that in mind with having our students walk through certain areas when we talk about saving money. That is one thing that hasn't been mentioned, but moving forward, that needs to be a topic of discussion as well. Ready to go? All right. Next item, Madam Secretary.
There is a recommendation on this item.
Oh, excuse me, my apologies. We've been talking about it so long. Yeah.
Is there a motion?
Do any committee members wish to make any comments, questions? We did all that. What's the pleasure of this particular item? With the report on transportation analysis and possible action on administrative recommendations for transportation. Yes, Director Zambor.
Would it be okay just to accept the report and not take any official action right now? It doesn't sound like there's, okay. So I move to accept the administration's report on transportation recommendations.
Madam Secretary, may you please call the roll?
On Director Zomber's motion to accept the administration's report on transportation recommendations, Director Fons.
Aye.
Director Herndon. Aye. Director Zomber.
Aye.
And Chair Jackson.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes.
Next item, please.
The next item is action on approval of the 2026-2027 salary schedules. The recommendation is that the board approve the 2026-2027 salary schedules as presented in the attachment.
Gotcha. Would administration please present this item?
Chair Jackson, members of the committee, Brenda Caselli, Superintendent. On May 28th, 2026, the board approved Phase 1 of salary increases for employees across the district effective July 1st, 2026. Consistent with the board's approved action, the attached 2026 salary schedule reflects the authorized increases and have been incorporated into the FY27 superintendent's proposed budget approved May 28th of 2026. We have met and confer on these items with our union partners, and this evening, the administration recommends that the board approve the 2026-2027 salary schedules as presented.
Do any members of the public wish to speak on this item?
We do not have any speaker slips on this item.
Okay. Any committee members? Director Zambor.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. Just a quick question. I just want to clarify, this is the 1.5%, and then you'll bring more salary schedules later.
Chair Jackson, Director Zambor, that is correct. Okay. It also includes steps and lanes.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from the committee? Okay. Well, it's a pleasure this item. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Chasen.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. Matt Chasen, OE. The salary schedule for ASC makes reference to an eligibility for an annual increase on the salary schedule, but the dollar amount is not listed. I think if it's consistent with historical practice, it's probably $2,000, but rather than speculate, I thought I would just pose the question here.
Administration.
Thank you, Director Jackson. I'm sorry, Mr. Chasen, Director Jackson. Correct, it is $2,000 for STEP, but that language will not be effective until January 1st, 2027. So the performance improvement plan as well as the mandatory training requirements will not begin until the 27-28 school year.
Mr. Chasen.
Thank you. And then to check for my understanding, the step that would be applied this year would be 2,000. The additional requirements that are set forth at the bottom of that schedule would take place in FY28.
That is accurate.
Okay. We're clear, we're good? Gotcha. All right, what is the pleasure of this particular item? Anybody? Director Zumbar.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I move approval of the administration's recommendation for the 26-27 salary schedules.
Madam Secretary, may you please call the roll?
On Director Zomber's motion to approve the administration's recommendation for the 2026-2027 salary schedules, Director Fons.
Aye.
Director Herndon. Aye. Director Zomber.
Aye.
And Chair Jackson.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is action on the request to waive Administrative Policy 3.09, Parent 9, Parent E, and issue a purchase order to HMH Education Company. The recommendation is that the board waive Administrative Policy 3.09 and authorize the purchase order as set forth in the attachments to this item.
May the administration please present this
Chair
item.
Jackson and members of the committee, Brenda Caselli, Superintendent. On October 30th, the board authorized the administration to proceed with the English Language Arts adoption process for grades 9 through 12. In alignment with that direction, the administration has completed the selection process and is now bringing forward the recommended adoption and associated purchase. The administration is requesting approval of a professional services contract with HMH Education Company in the amount of $6,585,919.07 for the English textbooks and supplemental instructional resources for students in grades 9 through 12. Funding for this contract is included in the FY27 budget and will be supported through Fund 10. The administration recommends the board approve this item as detailed.
Do any members of the public wish to comment on this item? Okay. Any committee members wish to comment on this item? All right. What is the pleasure and respects of this item? Director Zumbar.
I move approval of the administration's recommendation to waive policy 3.09 and authorize the purchase order set forth in the attachments.
There's no further discussion. Madam Secretary, may you please call the roll? We did have one director step out for a second.
We'll see. He'll be temporarily absent. We should still have a quorum. We'll see how it goes. Director Zomber's motion to approve the waiver of Administrative Policy 3.09, Parent 9, Parent E, and issue a purchase order to HMH Education Company. Director Fons is temporarily absent. Director Herndon? Aye. Director Zomber?
Aye.
And Chair Jackson?
Aye.
That's 3 ayes, 1 temporarily absent. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. Chair, item 4 is action on a request to approve conservation easements between Milwaukee Public Schools, the City of Milwaukee, and Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. The recommendation is that the board approve the limited-term conservation easements between Milwaukee Public Schools and the City of Milwaukee in favor of the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District.
Would administration please present this item?
Chair Jackson, members of the committee, Brenda Caselli is superintendent. This evening, we are asking for your approval on the item before you as it pertains to the conservation easements between MPS and the City of Milwaukee and Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. The administration recommends the approval of this item.
Any members of the public wish to comment on this item?
We have no speakers on this item.
Any committee members? Director Zomber?
I move approval of the administration's recommendation to approve the limited-term conservation easement.
Madam Secretary, may you please call the roll?
On Director Zomber's motion to approve the administration's recommendation for the temporary conservation easement, Director Fons?
Aye.
Director Herndon? Director Zomber?
Aye.
And Chair Jackson?
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. Chair, item 5 is action on a request to approve the amended and restated use and maintenance agreement with the Milwaukee Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Milwaukee. The recommendation is that the board approve the attached amended and restated use and maintenance agreement with the Milwaukee Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee, Inc.
Will the administration please present the item?
Chair Jackson, members of the committee, Brenda Caselli is superintendent. The proposed action updates the existing use of and maintenance agreement originally approved in 2004 between Milwaukee Public Schools and the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee related to the Rogers Street Academy site. The administration recommends approval of the amendments and restated use and maintenance agreement with the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee, Inc. related to Rogers Street Academy site. Just to mention, I spoke with the attorneys today, and they supported the passage of this item.
Do any members of the public wish to speak to this item?
We do not have any speaker slips.
All right. Any committee members wish to speak to this item? All right. What is the pleasure of this item? Director's on board.
I move approval of the administration's recommendation to approve the amended restated use and maintenance agreement.
May you please call the roll?
On Director Zomber's motion to approve the administration's recommendation to approve the amended and restated use and maintenance agreement with Milwaukee Boys and Girls Club, Director Fons?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director Zomber?
Aye.
And Chair Jackson?
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Item 6 is the triannual report with possible action on district audits and reviews. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Will the administration please present the item?
Chair Jackson, members of the committee, Brenda Caselli as superintendent. On March 24, 2026, the administration presented a comprehensive audit and review report outlining the structure of the report, along with the key definitions and explanations to ensure a clear understanding of the data and findings in our progress thus far. This evening, an updated report is attached for your review. In the interest of time this evening, and given the subsequent meeting, where we spent quite a number of minutes, maybe hour, going through the audit, I will not present the report in detail. However, I will highlight that we continue to make progress across all areas. And after reviewing the report, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out. I would note that in our operational audit from the governor's audit, we have increased from 22 to 28 items being completed, reflecting movement of 6 additional items into the active implementation or completion area. Also in the human resources audit, overall, the percentage of items in the complete or in progress increased from 62% to 86%, reflecting movement of action items and steps in the HR audit. And then in the instructional audit, we moved from 79% to 89%, reflecting our continued movement and action steps into ensuring that we have a high-quality program and academic vision moving forward. Thank you.
Any members of the public wish to comment on this item?
No speaker slips.
No speaker slips. Any committee members wish to comment on this item? How you feel about it, Mr. Chasen? All right. This was an informational item. Given that there is no action, we will proceed to the next item. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. Chair, that was the last item on this meeting's agenda.
Okay. I want to thank you. As a reminder, a meeting on the Committee of Strategic Planning and Budget, SPB, will begin shortly. There being no further business before the committee, this meeting is adjourned. But before I do, I just want to acknowledge the students and the family of Fratney you were seen and heard today. Just know that.